So maybe you're not playing golf to the level that you know you can. Maybe your ball striking isn't as solid as you'd like it to be, or maybe the ball isn't going as far as you'd like it to be. Well, today we're going to cover 3 faults which can really destroy your game and your golf swing. So if you are struggling, there's a very, very good chance that one of these will apply to you. So today we're looking at 3 things which potentially could be in your golf swing which is destroying your game or making it just incredibly difficult to play the golf that potentially you know you can play. Now, you may well have looked at your golf swing and you've seen some movements, some shapes and some things that you don't particularly like. But many of those things that you see, especially down at impact, are there because of something that happened earlier in the swing. Those things that you're seeing are the reaction. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to look at the root cause. What is actually causing so many of the issues that you're going to have at impact and downswing? And we're going to be tackling the club face, the shaft angle, and your weight or your pressure in the golf swing. Now, if you can start to work on these things, you can start to take out that root cause. The things after that can start to improve as well. Ball striking gets better, we hit it further, we hit it straighter, we shoot lower scores, everyone is happier. So we're going to start off with the first one, which is something to do with your weight in transition. So this is a real killer for any golf club that we're trying to hit from the ground, and that pretty much applies to obviously everything bar the driver. So whilst this would apply to the driver as well, it's going to be far more penalising with the iron clubs. And the fault is one where we don't get through the golf ball, we are hanging on our back foot. Now, when we have the ball on the ground, we know that the circle that represents the movement of the club, we know that that needs to have its low point target side of the ball. That's really the only way we're going to play great golf and have solid ball striking. So if we have our weight on our trail side or we leave our weight back in the downswing, it's almost impossible to get that low point target side of the ball. It's almost, in all cases, going to be behind the ball or at best level with the ball. And when you create that movement, it just means that ball striking will never be as good as it can be. And when you do make contact from the centre, the ball flight is going to be too high and you're going to be sacrificing distance. So if you get to the top of your golf swing and as you start down, you leave your weight on your back foot, not many good things happen. With driver, tee it up, you can get away with it a little bit more, but certainly, as we said there, with these iron clubs, it's really going to cost you in your ball striking, your distance and your flight control. So we need to have the weight moving forward to enable us to finish in this nice balanced position with the weight on the lead side. Now, the key point here is that the weight moving towards the target actually happens before that golf club has finished moving away from the target. So if I was to demonstrate that in slow motion, we make a backswing, we move the weight into that trail side, but as the golf club is completing its movement away from the golf ball, we should actually be starting to move our weight towards the target, hopefully, as you can see in that demonstration. This little exercise is brilliant to allow you to sense and feel that. Feet together, around about a foot behind the golf ball. And what we're going to get you to do is make a backswing, and when your lead arm reaches level with the ground, that's when you're going to begin to step through the shot. So let me show what that would look like. We're going to go back, lead arm level, and we start to step through the shot. And once I do that a few times, I start to get comfortable with that. That should feel like it's actually a really key ingredient to help me achieve good rhythm, good timing, good tempo. When I do that, it feels very smooth, it feels very natural, and it feels very rhythmical. If I do that incorrectly, going to feel very disjointed, it's going to feel jerky and certainly no rhythm at all. So this is something you can practice at home, in the garden, at the driving range, and just start to blend the golf swing with the movement of the weight. If you can start to blend these two together, you're going to be able to achieve those nice full finish positions. The weight is going to be moving correctly in the downswing and your ball striking is going to improve. Can you do that with a ball? Absolutely. It's obviously a little bit more difficult to contact it, and I would initially start off doing this at slow speed. But we can absolutely make the same movement. I can still focus on where I want to be at the end. It felt very balanced, the rhythm felt good, the timing felt good. And the really key message here is that the weight moving towards the target needs to happen before the golf club finishes its movement away. Club face. That is the second fault which can really destroy your golf game, and this is absolutely a big one. Get this club face out of position in the early downswing and so many bad things are going to happen in order to try and make that golf ball go straight. And when we're talking about the club face being out of position, we're effectively talking about the club face being far too open or far too closed. Far too closed is quite rare. It does happen, but we're going to address those golfers where the club face gets far too open. There are far more of you around, unfortunately. So when that golf club gets far too open, we really have a couple of options. Either we're going to spend our time hitting the ball way out to the right, spending too much time looking for the golf ball in the long rough of the trees, or you're going to start to try and recover that. And that's when we start to get movements like this flip, this flexing of the arms, even the weight hanging back, which we've just covered in that first point, are very often in there to rectify a club face which is open. So like we said right back at the start of the video, you may well have seen your swing from face on and seen that you don't like the flip or the release or the elbow position. But that's often the reaction. That's not necessarily the root cause. The root cause is in almost all cases that club face being far too open as you start your downswing. So a great little way to practice that, you're going to take a tee and you're going to place it just into the glove on your lead hand, just so it's sort of in the back of the Velcro, and it's just going to represent where the back of my hand faces. Now, the difficulty here when we're looking at club face is that when that golf ball is set behind the ball, it's quite easy to see whether it's open, closed, or pretty neutral. We've got our target, and we would know that this club points to the right, and this club points to the left, and this one points pretty straight. But when we have the golf club sort of, let's say, here in space, a little bit more difficult to see. It's harder to reference what would be neutral, what would be open, what would be closed. And very often when I coach, I'll put the club in a position, ask a golfer whether that is open, closed, or square, and they unfortunately don't have any idea. And it's understandable why, because we don't suddenly have that target as our reference. T-peg is going to help. So what we're going to get you to do is we're going to get you to go to the top of your golf swing, and I want you to work the club down towards parallel to the ground, as you can see there. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the feeling that the tee is pointing slightly downwards towards the ground, and therefore the club face is pointing slightly downwards. Those of you who really struggle with your ball striking, who really struggle with direction, as you start down, you're going to have more of this. Tee is pointing more upwards, club face is far more open. Now, the early part of the downswing is really important. In order to achieve that last parallel, we need to have the sensation that the tee is pointing more away from me, back towards where you're viewing this from, the camera, because if it works away from me, it will then begin to point more down towards the ground. Now, I've done that far too excessive, but that will be the feeling that I want. So from the top of my golf swing, I'm going to work the tee away from me, and therefore it will point more down towards the ground. Effectively what we're doing is we're applying a twist this way to the golf club. I'm starting to flatten out or arch my lead wrist. When we arch that lead wrist, it gives us the control on the club face that we want. As soon as we cup that wrist, club face gets open, right hand side it comes into play, or we start to introduce those full standard impacts which nobody wants. So from the top, tee is going to go away and down to the ground. That puts the club face in this great position, and then from there we can just rotate through and hit much straighter golf shots with more consistency, with better ball striking. We hit higher at the face, the ball comes off faster. Like we said right at the start, everything else improves when you can control the club face. And the final thing, the final movement that could be within your golf swing, which is really holding you back and destroying the game, is the club shaft steepening in the downswing. Something that plagues so many golfers, something that the best players in the world don't do, something that higher handicappers tend to do quite regularly. Why is it an issue? Well, if we were to put the golf club into sort of any position in the downswing, it doesn't really matter where we are. If I start to add rotation towards the target, the club head is naturally moved more out towards the golf ball, or more towards the target line. You can see that there. So we know that rotation moves the club head more outward. So if I'm a golfer who, from the top, steepens the club shaft excessively, that's probably a little bit more than we would tend to see, the club head is already far too close to the target line. Therefore, any rotation that I add just makes things far worse. If I do rotate, the club head moves far too much out in front of me, and my club path gets excessively across the golf ball, and I'm going to hit horrendous slices and pulls, and I'm probably going to find it really hard to hit the middle of the golf club. So it's very difficult to play with that movement. So the golfers who tend to steepen the club shaft early will generally tend to not rotate, because rotation doesn't help them, it hinders them. So once they make this steepening move here, they often don't rotate. When they don't rotate, it's really hard to then get the weight forward. It's really hard to get the handle forward. And we often get these really uncomfortable looking cramped impact positions where the elbows are separating, the club head is overtaking the hands. We get this very, very restricted follow through position. Those golfers often communicate that as it just feels terrible through impact. It feels cramped. It feels like we've got no room. As I'm sure you can imagine, it's really difficult to hit solid golf shots and consistently control the club face when those things are happening. So when the club shaft steepens, not many good things happen. And again, like we've said so many times in this video, you'll often see things happening at impact which you don't like, but it's the result of the club shaft being a little bit too steep. Now, generally speaking, that club shaft steepens because of what this trail arm does. The elbow often starts to point more back and high, and that's what steepens the club shaft. So in order for you to fix that, I'd love you to do this little exercise. You're going to go up to the top, and then the sensation would be that your lead arm stays in position, and in transition your trail elbow moves in towards the golf ball. It starts to move lower than your lead elbow. So as you can see, as I get to the top, I'm really sensing this lead elbow and lead arm stays in position, and I really feel like my trail elbow is the one that's almost trying to drive inwards and lower than my lead elbow. If you can do that, it may well feel in transition or in practice that you can shallow the club shaft. We don't really need you to shallow the club shaft. We just want to take away a lot of that excessive steepening movement. So what would that look like? It would look like up to the top, trail elbow starts, that shallows the golf club. Now I'm in a position where rotation is actually a good thing, because rotation brings the golf club more back into the delivery position that I want. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to go up to the top, a couple of rehearsals, and then we go ahead and rotate through. So that's going to have a really different sensation, a different feeling for you, and that's certainly one that you need to be at the drive range with first, the practice area. You know, don't even think about going to the golf course with that until you've had some practice sessions with it, you started to understand it, you started to feel more comfortable with it, because that is a very, very difficult move to work on. But it is something that we do need to work on, because if you are that golfer who stands the club shaft up, you're going to see lots of other poor things happening in an attempt to fix that. So the three things that I really see destroying people's golf games: hanging back, club face open, club shaft steepening. They're the things that we really need to work out in your game to help you unlock your best golf, which I'm sure you know is in there. We just need to help that come out. Really hope that video was helpful. I'd love to hear your comments, so drop down into the comments box, let me know. Give it a thumbs up if you did like the video, and we'll hopefully see you back here again soon for a future video. Thanks for watching.